My name is Mansa Lui. I'm the chapter lead of the Transformative Technology San Francisco Bay Area chapter. Welcome you here. The chapter is very new, so we are only a few months old, and you see I walk around and have to talk to a lot of people because we need volunteers. So if you are interested to volunteer and make this community stronger and flourish, please come talk to me. We are looking for many positions, especially in the marketing side of things. So another thing we want to do an announcement is that Transformative Tech Conference actually is coming up. The early bird, I think, will be coming out in 2 weeks. So that's a very great conference. I was there last year, the first time, and that's when I feel very inspired and joined this community. So the conference has gone, this is the 5th time of the conference. So I hope you would join us. And then the Transformative Tech Academy is opening soon too. I also joined them. Actually, that's why I joined first before I go to the conference. It's actually a free event. You would get to learn from a lot of experts about what transformative tech is, funding and pitch, and what companies are doing in this space. So watch out for your emails. And I want to also talk about next time. So we are going to have an event every month. July will be the 9th, the second Tuesday. We have someone from Google that will be talking about, so Adam Leonard, he would give everyone a small taste of the developmental approach he teach for Google executives. So basically, we want to help companies to build successful teams, and his expertise might be very useful for you. Lastly, I want to thank all our sponsors and community partners. So the workspace, this is the venue that is actually donated to us to run these events. Ripple Evacs is a company that helps a lot of disadvantaged kids in public schools, I believe. Am I right? Steph, yes. To learn mental skills to deal with difficulties in their young lives. Infrared saunas, Jessica, you're here. So it's a healthy way to do jacuzzi. Upbeat is actually my company, but the logo is kind of just be there. So we will have a new one hopefully next time. And then Jonathan is helping us to record this event. You will get a link later if you want to share with your friends. His company is called the Emperor Has No Clothes podcast. And I still yet to hear it. And then my co-host, Mark, he has an integral cinema project. And we are also very thankful to the San Francisco Tech for Good to help us to get the words out. Who's here because of this San Francisco Tech for Good, actually? Okay, cool. So you find other ways. So without further ado, I think we would do a meditation led by Mark.
Okay. Oh, okay. So everyone get in a comfortable position, wherever you are. We're going to do a kind of perceptual practice, hybrid meditation. So if you could close your eyes and just bring your attention to your breath, just observing how you're breathing in and out. Now, as you're noticing your breath, see if you could also notice any smells that you are picking up using our olfactory organ. Some may be strong, some may be subtle. And try to observe how that smell feels. Does it feel like something that's good or bad? Neutral? If you can't smell anything, then that's noticing as well. And now if you could try to hold that awareness and expand it to include noticing the sound of my voice, how that is vibrating inside your eardrum, and any other sounds. And not just the sounds themselves, but try to sense how the sounds sound in the space we're in. Can you hear the space enveloping the sound and how that feels? And holding the awareness of the breath and the smells and the sounds, can you bring your awareness to the sensations that you're feeling in your body where you are sitting? Can you feel the seat beneath you? And if you have your hands on your lap or your hands touching each other, bring your awareness to that feeling. And now, if we can, holding the awareness of our senses of smell, of sound, of touch, and in a moment I'm going to ask you to open your eyes, but not yet. And when I say so, I want you to slowly open your eyes, trying to hold your awareness of those other senses as well. And just try to feel what it's like as you open your eyes to include the visual field and how that affects your awareness of the other senses and how it shifts how you're feeling. And then open your eyes slowly. And try to hold all those awarenesses, and here we are. These are just some of our senses.
Good.
And I think we're going to talk about how to use those in some way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Feeling relaxed. So I want to share with you why we are so lucky to have Tracy to be here to speak with us today. Tracy has a lot of credentials, so I'm going to share some of it. Tracy's full name is Tracy Rosenthal Newsom. She is an award-winning video game and digital health product executive, experience designer, and innovators. Yes? Sure. No, I was kind of melt into the meditation mood. Okay, I will be louder. So with over 20 years experience developing digital products and immersive experiences that inspire transformative change. As a co-creator of Rock Band and Dance Central video game franchise, and former GM of Harmonix, Tracy and her teams transformed people's relationship with music and with each other, redefined the party game genre, and brought joy to millions around the world. As the chief CPO of Exxon, the makers of Muse, the brain sensing headband, Tracy with her teams transformed the Muse meditation app from an MVP into an authentic UX experience for consumers and mental health professionals, and led the R&D for the low-down focus smart glasses and its Smith focus app for mental training. There's more. Committed to reducing human suffering and enabling joy and healing across multiple platforms, Tracy advises multiple companies serving health and well-being, including Achilles Interactive and Neuroscape. Both are pioneers of digital treatments for cognitive disorders, and then also Ripple Effects, which delivers interactive experiences that teach social emotional skill training and promotes personal resilience and social equality for school-age children. In addition, she serves as a career and life coach for professionals seeking to align their career and life goals with their values and purpose. So welcome to Tracy to speak with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Aha. Have you ever been so completely immersed in your job, in a project, that you completely lose yourself? You're head down, you're driving because you just want to get it done. Maybe you're juggling way too many things and you're afraid that one of them might fall to the ground, so you just keep going and you lose track of time. You don't sleep well. You don't eat well. You actually completely forget about everything else that's going on in your life. And does any of you have that experience before? Well, that was me. Pretty much most of my game development career. And it's interesting because there's now this new diagnosis of burnout just out from the World Health Organization. And work-related stress has actually been an epidemic. It's a hot topic now. It's been a problem for a while. So what do you do to de-stress? Do you have any tools in your back pocket to take a break, to find relief? Well, I feel kind of lucky because back in 2007, when I was at Harmonix, we were making the biggest, most ambitious project that we had ever made. It was the first Rock Band game. We were doubling the size of our studio from 75 to about 150 in less than a year. I mean, we were pretty much just like throwing people onto the team to get it done. It was such a huge project. We had never, ever been responsible for hardware and software at the same time. We had to make drums and guitars. We had more drumsticks being manufactured in China than I think has ever been at one time. It was insane. I was going out of my mind. The publisher didn't believe me that I could get the game done. And I was the senior producer at the time. I was responsible to take this really huge team and get it done. So what did I do? I went into my office, I closed the door, I sat down on my Rock Band drum set, and I banged the shit out of the drums for maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, playing the most amazing rock songs. It was incredible. It was an incredible way to de-stress in the middle of my job, actually. I was finding bugs for my development team. You know, I was finding little polish to make the experience better. But most importantly, I was reconnecting with myself. I was feeling like a rock star. Now, that ridiculous photo, which is of me, you know, it's funny. I thought I would show it to you guys, but actually it was like this alter ego that I got to be every now and then. At the very end of our development schedule, we're in beta. And it's insane. We're working way too many hours. But then even though we still had to keep working, we were like, no, we are going to make the best gift for our team. We're going to make a tome of awesomeness. And so everybody on the team had to have a crazy rock star photo taken of them. And, you know, it was one of those moments where you were like, okay, you know, why are we doing this? We're doing this for each other, and we're doing this maybe to make people a little bit happier. So I tell you this story because I'm recognizing the exponential levels of stress and disconnection and anxiety that are happening today. How might we design for a healthier future of connection, of well-being, and of joy in this great time of need? I believe that new immersive experiences, products and games that leverage today's emerging technologies can help us experience joy again. They can help us connect with one another, and they can even make us healthier. So today I'm going to lean back into my career, about 20 years making music, video games, and digital health products that sought a way to change the way people felt for the better. So first, who in the room ever played a harmonics video game? Rock Band, Dance Central? Okay, I got a few of you guys out there. Awesome. It won't be completely new to you. So it was the year 2000, and I joined harmonics because I wanted to create new ways of playing. And the founders, Alex and Iran, they wanted to create for non-musicians the joy of making music. And so we spent many years, many years, with quite a few failed game releases, actually. And I'll talk about a few of those today. But before we were able to actually take some bold risks that some people thought were crazy, we put plastic instruments that looked like toys in people's hands. We strapped them onto their bodies. We actually reintroduced classic rock music into a culture that wasn't listening to it at that time. We even got gamers off their couches dancing in their living rooms. And these were big risks with very uncertain outcomes. Every time we used some new piece of technology to create a new play experience that embodied that new experience, and through the music that they loved and fine-tuned design game principles, we actually found out that we could truly transform the way people felt. Now, at the height of our success, our music and dance games, they were marketed as entertainment products. But the stories that we heard from our communities, I think they're more profound. And for those of you out here that are in the health and well-being field looking to help people today, I think it's kind of interesting. You know, we heard that Guitar Hero saved a man's marriage. We heard that a girl playing Dance Central with her boyfriend led to a marriage proposal. We heard from a mom and dad who played the Beatles Rock Band with their withdrawn teenager and found empathy again. These are a few stories, but they highlight something that's kind of interesting. When we think of video games, we think of the competition. We think of the high scores. But I think those are secondary to the connection that these people felt when they were playing together. Levels of stress, anxiety, disconnection, they have increased exponentially since the heyday of our music games, which were about 2005 to 2012. Yet these games and the practices that we use to create them, they hold lessons for you, for all of you who are making transformative experiences today. What big risk are you willing to take to enable connection and joy when people need it most? So this is the Human Wellbeing Spectrum. It was created by Nicole Bradford, our founder of the Transformative Tech Lab. And for those of us that are interested in really having an impact, enabling positive emotional states and reducing negative emotional impact, this framework can actually help us to change our mindset from thinking about people from being sick versus being healthy to actually looking across the whole spectrum. How may we address the gaps of people at one end that are languishing from a lack of basic social and emotional skills? Or maybe how can we enable flourishing of enhanced emotional capacities? So the video games and the digital health products that I've worked on over my career have actually sought to change the way people feel across this emotional framework, to reduce stress, to manage anxiety, to reduce loneliness, to increase happiness, to increase empathy, to increase connection and enable joy. So Guitar Hero, that was our first Rockstar sim. And it delivered an experience unlike anything that you could get on a standard Sony PlayStation 2 controller, right? Tapping buttons on a controller wasn't going to make you feel like a rock star. So you would strap on that plastic guitar, and you would press the fret buttons in time as the notes were cascading down your TV screen. Guitar Hero connected with you, the non-musician, and you felt like you were on stage at an arena with ZZ Top or maybe the Ramones, that you were the one that was making those famous licks and riffs, that you were a famous guitar player. It actually made you feel like you were making the sounds that were coming from your television or from your speakers. And the thing that was surprising to us was this broad appeal that this experience had. We were really surprised. In addition to the gamers who found joy and happiness while they were striving for high scores, it was all those non-gamers, their friends and their families who wanted to play this game with them. We had tapped into something special. We had tapped in to an aspiration, to a feeling, to a connection. It was a much more universal experience than we had originally expected. Rock Band was all about this feeling of being in a band. So it was the first music video game to combine all aspects of virtual music making: singing, pounding drums, and playing guitar and bass. 4 players, if you remember the first game, for 4 players could act as a group and fulfill their fantasy of touring the world as a rock band. For those of you that remember, the initial offering, there was these huge, big band boxes. I don't know if you remember walking into Best Buy and there were these huge pallets of these rock band boxes. It was crazy that retail was even willing to take them at the time. You would get a game, you'd get a microphone, you'd get a faux drum set, and you'd also get a guitar. So the feeling of connection emerged in a variety of ways. I think the first one is the one I talked about earlier, which is that connection to oneself, the feeling through the physical aspects as the music is running through your body and you are physically drumming or you're physically playing the guitar. And that embodiment, that really had you feeling that connection. The second one is the emergence of meaning, which people felt as they were connected to these great rock songs that they loved. And then finally, and most importantly in this game, it was this connection of playing in a band together, right? Like, oh wow, I am a non-musician and I can be in a band. And while you were playing in that living room with each other, you would feel joy and empathy for one another. So Dance Central was my dream game come true. I had always wanted to make a dance game with real choreography. And see, before that, you couldn't make dance games with real choreography. Because, I don't know if you remember, Dance Dance Revolution, you would be jumping on dance pads. But we had access to the Kinect camera while it was in development at Microsoft. They were one of our partners. And so this was the first full body tracking dance game where you could learn actual dance routines that were designed by professional choreographers. And it turned your living room into a dance party. So what was so fun about it, I remember early on we had made a singing and dancing game, one of our failures actually, and we were using the dance pads, and I kept wanting to, have real choreography, and I was doing all these ridiculous things to try to make it happen. And all of a sudden, now I had access for my entire body to be detected. And so you could do something really simple, like a simple step touch, or something really complex from the hottest pop stars and their choreographers who often worked with us. But I'll never forget when we debuted this game. So we debuted at E3 to thousands of predominantly male gamers who come to the convention halls to check out the games each year. And I was really nervous. I was actually really scared about how our dance game was going to be received in this environment. I mean, our dance game was designed for people who love to dance and willing non-dancers. But here were a lot of gamers, a lot of guys who were used to sitting on a couch playing Call of Duty. They weren't physical gamers. And I remember they would come up to the booth. I often would see kind of some fear in their faces and a little bit tense, but they still wanted to try it out. And we had this cool stage that we had made so that they could actually dance with our choreographers to make it a little more comfortable for them. And so they would come up because they wanted to play the demo, and the demo was to Lady Gaga's Poker Face. So they come up and they start dancing. And I'll never forget watching that fear melt away and their smiles emerge as they began to realize that they could dance. And it was amazing to see the self-confidence rise in their bodies. And when they were done, I could see the surprise on their faces. And it's funny because I remember so often we would get, emails and messages from our fans and on our forums about people who had gained self-confidence from this silly dance game. All right, so after my 14 years at Harmonix, I took my own big personal risk. I jumped into a whole new field for me, the brain health and technology industry. I had been a 24/7 workaholic game executive. I had been really giving more to the millions of fans and to my team at Harmonix than to my family. And one night, while I was away on another business trip, my daughter came home from diving practice. We thought that she was recovered from a concussion that she had received about a month previously. And her head was spinning and spinning, and she was pulled into post-concussive syndrome. I was, of course, incredibly guilty for being away. I felt horrible. She suffered memory loss. She had headaches for a long time. Her schoolwork had to be reduced, her physical activities. And she joined a group of girls, all whom had experienced concussions at this adolescent, teenage time in their lives. And all of them were in a high school pullout program that was sponsored by our local mental health community, which I am very grateful for. The honest truth is, I could not have saved her from her post-concussive syndrome, nor the brutal symptoms that she experienced for many months. Yet my inability to help her suffering, or find quick relief, or help her heal, ignited my own quest to learn about the brain. And I tried for the next few years to gather information and kind of dig it out of the medical profession. That is another talk. But the good news is that she's recovered. She's an amazing young woman. She is in college. She's teaching this summer in New York. She's an EMT. She's thriving. That's the good news. However, that experience, it really shifted my purpose and my focus for the next professional chapter in my life. And I decided I really wanted to consciously create experiences for people who are struggling, for people who are in need, for people to feel better. And so at the same time, I recognized I needed to take care of myself, and I started to meditate, and that led me to move to Toronto, where I brought my expertise to the brain tech and meditation industry to lead product at Interaxon, the makers of Muse, and this was in 2015. Muse is, for those of you here who are unfamiliar, it's the first portable EEG brain sensing headband. And it's a meditation experience, and it helps you to learn how to meditate and commit to a practice while providing feedback on your brain. And while you're meditating with Muse headband, your eyes are closed, your earphones are on, and the portable EEG headband senses the brain waves, and it translates what's happening in your brain into its really unique kind of meditation feedback. It's in the form of audio cues. And so it immerses the person in the soundscape, and it helps them to stay focused. Now, not a game per se. Many of you out here are making apps that are not games, but we used game design principles to help people learn how to meditate and to sustain a meditation practice. So a couple of years later, it's 2017, and I've moved back to the States, where my worlds of video games and brain health converge. So years earlier, I had heard Dr. Adam Ghazali speak on the future of video games and cognitive enhancement. And I knew immediately I needed to get to know him. I mean, I had already seen for years how the emotional and mental transformation that was happening in people who were playing our music games. I saw that over and over, and I thought, this is really interesting. What else can we do with it? Here was a neuroscientist who was proving the efficacy of how custom video games that he was creating in his lab could treat neurological and psychiatric conditions. So upon returning to California, Achille Interactive brought me on. They became my first client upon my return, and they are pioneers in digital medicine. They use video game technologies and actually a bunch of research from Dr. Ghazali's lab. And I worked with them as an advisor, as a user testing strategist on their very first video game treatment that was in development. And then last year, I started working with Dr. Ghazali at Neuroscape. And we're developing a music and movement video game in virtual reality called Coherence VR. And it's intended to evaluate and train one's rhythm, right up my alley, for the potential treatment for cognitive disorders. And so it's designed with a closed loop system. And what that means is that this game treatment is personalized for your experience each time you play it as a unique person in a unique play session. And every time you play it, it's adjusted based on your performance. So when it's ready, this game treatment will go into feasibility studies. And likely, the first couple of populations that it'll go into will be mild cognitive decline and dyslexia. So now I want to share with you some best practices of UX design that have helped us make the video games and the digital products that I've worked on really so engaging and enabled people to transform the way they feel. Number one, create a context that matters. So when Harmonix set out to create a game that enabled the joy of making music for non-musicians, we started by creating this very addictive rhythm action core mechanic. And it was on a PlayStation 2 controller in a game called Frequency. Anybody here ever play Frequency? I'll tell you why. So hitting buttons in time on a controller, it took a lot of time. First of all, the mappings for your PlayStation 2 controller and what we saw on the screen didn't map. So challenging, but once you played it for a little while, it actually felt really good. You kind of got in the flow, felt like you were making music. So we thought, okay, great, let's bring people in, let's see what they think about it. First, let's check out the marketing materials. So we showed people this, sort of psychedelic environment. We showed them the song list of these songs that were crafted for the game. No one was very interested. So then we said, okay, now let's play the game. And it took them a little while, but they actually liked it. And they gave us some great feedback. And we're kind of excited that people actually really like this game. That translated into really good reviews and almost no sales. Nobody got it. Nobody bought it. It was a huge failure. So then we thought, okay, let's try it again. So our next game was called Amplitude. And the difference in Amplitude, same, kind of very addictive rhythm action core mechanic, but we put you in this beat blaster and you're, traveling through these psychedelic environments. And, but we put some popular music into the game. Once again, very abstract experience. Nobody got it. Nobody bought it. It was a huge failure. It wasn't until we created a context that people aspired to be, that they fully understood that this very addictive mechanic that we had created earlier could actually help with the success. And so we had to wrap this mechanic in a narrative that a person understood, that they aspired to be. And it made all the difference. It's how the Rockstar Sim was actually born. So it required hardware. It required a plastic guitar for you to hold, to stand and play. It required Guitar Hero characters that you aspired to be, rock clubs that you wanted to perform in, and popular rock songs that you only had ever dreamed of playing. Now with Muse, the team recognized this challenge of meditation. It's an invisible activity on the brain. New meditators often, they don't know how to do it. They don't even know if they're doing it right. So the team developed a context by putting you in this audioscape that immerses you in this nature environment that enables the feedback mechanic to ground the player. And it made all the difference. So have you considered, in the product that you're making, what context are you providing your user to help them understand where they are and where they're going? Number two, develop layered interaction mechanics. So a compelling core mechanic is really important, and it actually takes a really long time to iterate on it. And it's so important to be thinking about this relationship between the human interactions that the people are doing and all the interfaces, the visuals, possibly the hardware. And how do those two things actually reinforce the possibility of creating positive emotions? And this is challenging. I mean, in making the video games, it took us a long time. We're always playing around just to make sure that the feelings that we're trying to enable are happening based on all these little things inside the games. So in Guitar Hero, for example, you'd have the timing of these gems coming on the track, and when did those animations come up? You know, at what point in time is the crowd beginning to scream, depending on how well you're doing? What does it feel like when you put this guitar against your body? Actually, what is the feeling of the buttons that are on that guitar, or that strum switch? You know, how are we going to make a switch that actually feels like you're playing guitar? And then all of these things together, coming together, is what actually delivers the fantasy. So in Rock Band, it was all about creating the feeling of being in a band. And you know, we did have to create the individual mechanics of drums and singing and guitar. But the thing that was important, really important, was what are these collaborative mechanics? Think about it for a second. Those of you that have been playing, and you can look up here, you know, there's 3 different instruments and the vocals at the top. So you're looking at your television screen, and the people are all standing next to each other, very unlike the way it might be if you're in a band where you're turning your body around and you're looking at each other, right? Because you're so focused on the interface because you want to make sure that you're hitting your patterns right. So we had to think about how are we going to create actual collaborative mechanics inside the game that makes you feel that way. So for those of you that played, I don't know if you remember, you could fail out when you were playing in a song. And if your bandmates were paying attention and you were actually looking at each other every now and then and paying attention to what was happening, someone else could enact overdrive and save their bandmate. And that was really important because as a collective, you were looking to get higher scores together. So a very simple and yet really important way to pay attention to each other. Of course, there was lots of screaming and all that kind of stuff that would happen when someone would fail out, help me, help me. And then at the very end of the song, there was something we called the Big Rock endings. And you know, we had this thing where everybody could solo in the middle of the songs, but at the very end, everybody was given solos at the same time. So it was pure cacophony, right? Everyone's like button mashing, go crazy, it's totally insane. And then at the very end of the phrase, everyone had to hit the final note at the same time. And that feeling was incredible. You're going crazy, and bam, and all of a sudden in the living room, you feel this like energy, everyone together, and the audio goes crazy, and all of the visuals go crazy, and it ends up being this moment where you're looking at one another and you're like, wow, that was amazing, what are we gonna do next? So think about how does the core mechanic and the product that you are working on right now today, how does it make the player feel? And are you looking at ways in which you can layer those interaction mechanics to deepen the emotional experience that your player or your user is having? Number 3, invest in feedback systems. So in the process of making immersive experiences, you often, with new hardware and new technologies, learning is a fundamental part of the immersive experience that you're actually creating for them. And feedback is this powerful mechanism for learning because users need to understand what to do. Are they doing it right? And how well are they doing at the experience that you are providing for them? Audio-visual, tactile, user interface elements, those are the tools for effective communication. And you really want to be setting those user expectations, and then you want to be providing feedback. So, real-time feedback. It's really necessary to help your user understand how am I doing. In Rock Band, for instance, you would have these gems that are coming towards you, and then you would be able to see as a player, when are you supposed to hit them? You'd get immediate positive and negative feedback based on what you did with animations, with audio cues, and it would help the player understand their success and their failure in real time. And no matter what the project is that you're working on, it's really critical to be giving people feedback, especially when it's something very, very new that they've never experienced before. So with Dance Central, we went through a lot of different versions to try to figure out how are we going to help people know what's the next set of moves that they're going to do in the song while they're doing a set of moves. And super challenging to figure out what that user interface is going to look like. We settled on these flashcards, and they would come up the side of the screen, and what we realized is we had to create an entire dance vocabulary that we were going to be teaching people over time. And we created dance move names, we created icons, and that was the way in which we would cue you as you were going along. And then at the end of every 4 count moves, we would actually give you a little spotlight. And that spotlight would help you know how well you did. So if you weren't doing very well, you'd get a red spotlight. But if you were killing it, you would get this white, shimmery spotlight that said flawless. And so what was so interesting about that choice, that language choice, was how it made someone feel to read the word flawless, over and over again. Think about what is the language that you're using when you are helping your user understand how well they're doing. Wanted to tell you this little story about that. I was thinking about this just yesterday, so I don't have a picture of Karaoke Revolution, but one of the failures that we made way early on was a game called Karaoke Revolution. It was a singing game. It's actually how we developed the singing mechanics that we later used in Rock Band. But I won't ever forget this situation because we were playtesting Karaoke Revolution, and we had put in, when you were doing poorly, the crowd started booing you. Well, in playtesting, people felt horrible. I mean, people didn't want to even, sing another song. And one of the things that we recognized is how vulnerable singing is as an expression. It's something that, people have to build up courage to do. And so if they are building up that courage and they're not doing very well and you're booing them, they're probably not going to want to play the game again. So we took that out. Anyway, it was an interesting lesson, very interesting lesson. So real-time audio feedback is core to the Muse experience. When you're gently focused on your breath and you're hearing these peaceful weather sounds, and then maybe there's like a sprinkle of the rainforest coming in, and then all of a sudden your mind wanders over here, and then the storm picks up, and then there's a cue. It got really quiet in here. And then there's this real-time trigger when it's storming, and all of a sudden you notice, my mind has wandered, and then you refocus your attention on your breath. So very, very unique way in which to help cue somebody, when their eyes are closed and they're in a completely different state of being. So think about what types of visuals, what kinds of animations, what types of audio you can use in your product to help people understand how they're doing. What I am calling post-level feedback is something that's super common in games. You're at the end of a game level, you get your score, and it helps you understand how well you did, potentially if you've improved from the last time. However, this is a real opportunity for designers to craft intentional messaging that aligns with your emotional goals and actually highlights factors that will motivate your player to keep going on their journey. So in Rock Band, for instance, at the end of a song, you'd get your scores. You'd get a bunch of funny performance stats. And often what would happen is you're in the room and you'd be joshing with each other and try to figure out who was better and do we going to play this song again, or should we move on to another song? It was a motivator, the way in which we presented that data. With Muse, at the end of a meditation session, They would also give you post-level feedback. So after each time you'd meditate, you would get a visualization of your brain activity in the form of a graph. And it was interesting when I was at Interaxon, we spent a lot of time talking about, how do we want to emphasize the information that we give you at the end of a meditation session? We want to encourage you to keep meditating. We also want you to learn to accept just where you are. We don't want you to be striving for points. And yet, we need some kind of information for you to reflect upon the experience that you just had. So very interesting in the world that many of you are in, working in health and well-being, how you reflect upon what types of feedback you give people at the end of an experience that you give to them. The third feedback mechanism is the tracking of one's play over time. So helping the player notice, where are they along their journey? In the harmonics games, it would usually be songs or dance routines that were unlocked over time when you were playing a campaign. You could also play higher and higher level of difficulties or even complexity. And we would track you over time. Also, we would show you the modes of play, the songs you hadn't played yet. Potentially, we'd show you the levels that you had not yet gone to. And these were motivators. We want to motivate you to explore the product again and to actually understand where you could possibly go. So with Muse, the app documents your Muse meditation over the course of time and provides cumulative results. Tracking your weekly goals, you set a goal, how many minutes do you want to meditate this week? How are you doing compared to your intention? They also show you the lessons in a course. So you're tracking, you're motivating them to keep going. And this progression tracking can really build motivational structures that are super helpful to sustain a commitment to a practice. It's really important with a practice like meditation to keep somebody continuing to be in their practice to actually see and feel the changes over time. And for many of you who are working in the field of health and wellness, this is really critical to think about how are you going to help someone really understand where they are on their journey. Their journey, do they even know that they're making change? How do you help them understand that they're making change? How do you help them recognize there's always going to be ups and downs? But how do you help them stick with practice? So I think this is an area that's really ripe for innovation when I look at what's out there right now. And I think it would be, a fun jam to have with a bunch of you that are doing this to think about how can we help people understand where they are on their journey and notice when they are making changes and celebrate that. So an innovative approach that we're using at Neuroscape is called the closed loop system. And for example, you're playing a game on a tablet or in virtual reality, and the system records all aspects of players' behavior, and then it's fed into a game engine. And then that is then fed back to the player with an adaptation based on their performance. And then very specifically, it's based on the experience that they had that day. And that loop continues, really challenging the player at their edge to get them to change over time. So at Neuroscape, we deliver a combination of traditional, engaging game mechanics with a closed loop system that's designed with personalization. And that has been proving out, actually, to deliver treatments that work. There's been a number of clinical studies that have been going on across a number of different populations with cognitive disorders. So one of those was based on some research that was done at the lab at Neuroscape that went into Achille Interactive's first video game treatment. And that is a treatment for pediatric ADHD. It's currently in the FDA pipeline right now. And if it's approved, it could become the first prescription digital medicine video game. So we'll see. We're on the edge. Number 4, nail ease of use and delight on day one. So when you're designing a completely new product, you're introducing something new into the market. It could be a new game, it could be a new experience, it may be with new hardware. Your first time user experience really needs to be easy. It needs to be intuitive. And I think it needs to be delightful. As a designer, it's your responsibility to ensure that your user understands what to do and how to do it. Also, that the hardware and software actually work on day one. And that first time engaging with your product is so satisfying that they actually want to come back and play again. So all of the products, the games and digital health products that I've worked on, we've iterated a lot in this area. It takes a long time to get it just right. It's actually one of my favorite parts of the development process. I love onboarding because I love seeing someone who is experiencing this thing that we've made in an office, and we finally get to interact with the people that we think we're serving, and then we find out, oh, whoops, this is not what we thought. Help us understand how you can really get into this experience in a way that really feels satisfying. So I think the ultimate first day experience was created in Guitar Hero, and it was with Joan Jett's I Love Rock and Roll. It's the first song that's introduced to you in the game. And when you're playing that song, you immediately feel like a rock star. And I think that the selection of the song was actually brilliant by the audio director, because we were delivering an experience at that time that didn't exist in the States. Physical Rockstar Sims was not a thing yet. And so we needed all of the elements of the game to support this. And I Love Rock and Roll has 3 simple power chords, perfectly thematic lyrics that are mapped directly onto the rhythm. I love rock and roll. Remember it? You guys could probably sing it. But it's really, really easy to understand. And the message, I love rock and roll, is coming through you. And you're probably singing it, while you're playing. So very interesting way to think about how can you deliver simple skills, a message, maybe from some of the other content. How do you embody and to deliver the experience in that very first time? So with Muse, as with Dance Central, a calibration step was necessary on day one. So the hardware needs to be sunk up with your body, right? And that's critical. And yet our bodies are all different. Our environments that we're experiencing, your products, are all different. So it's really important, if you want your user to get to the core experience that you're delivering, that there aren't any barriers in their way. So lead them through a hardware calibration process, help them, give them feedback as you're going through it. So I remember when we were play testing Dance Central with Kinect. And it's interesting because Microsoft actually had to create an experience with the Kinect camera because it was a brand new piece of hardware that was going to be needed for many games. And so there was this calibration step in the beginning that they created for us. And those of you, I don't know how many of you even ever saw the Kinect camera? You at all familiar with it? A few of you? Okay. So you put the camera either above your television screen or below it, and you needed to step back and have enough room because you needed your whole body to be inside the frame. And so they would lead you through this experience, and then once it was calibrated, ideally, you were then calibrated when you got into the game. And sometimes you would actually have to tweak that a little bit to make sure that it worked. With Muse, one of the things that's interesting, of course, is that you need to make sure that the sensors are really connected to your skin so that they are effective. And so, for instance, if you have long hair, you might have hair between the headband and the skin behind your ears. And so it's important to help people understand, oh, pull your hair up to make sure that this experience is going to work for you. So consider, are there any barriers in the experience that you are delivering? What might get in your way, and how could you strip away the complexity of that very first day and make it really simple and easy and seamless? Think about what that might look like. So in the harmonics games, we would spend a lot of time after we selected what the first couple levels would be, then we would fine-tune them to make them really, really accessible, really achievable to newcomers. And one of the reasons that we spent so much time was we learned very early on that we were reaching a really wide demographic, which meant that they needed to be really accessible for everybody. And that may or may not be true for your products and games that you are creating. Very, very important, though, to make sure that your user on day one, that they can say, I can do this, and I've got confidence that I can do this, and I'm feeling really good doing it, because then they'll want to come back and do it again. When those interactions that you design are so delightful and fun, then your user wants to have that experience again, and they'll come back into your product. Yeah, the one thing I want to just make sure that you guys also know is that we spent a lot of time on this, but because our products were also for people who were hardcore gamers and spent hours and hours playing guitar, drums, or in a band, there was a lot of depth inside the games as well. And I think it's interesting as we think about how we may be working in this health and well-being space, that what is the depth, what is the complexity of that experience over time also, as we look at how we might help people change. All right, number 5, test, test, test. This part I love. If there's anything that you take away today, I would say please do user testing and start really early, and then do it over and over again throughout development. Once you release your product, keep testing. Bring your beginner's mind to this process. Be open to not know what the solutions are that you will discover from your users. Watch them interact with the thing that you're making. Talk to them, listen to what they have to say, and learn from them. So in games, we always called it play testing. And I wouldn't lose sight of the word play. I think it's actually really important no matter what experience you guys are designing, because it's the user's behaviors, it's their interactions, it's their feelings that you need to understand. Early on, when we were play testing Dance Central with Connect, and I was alluding to this earlier, so we brought people in, they start dancing, they're having a really good time, they feel like they know what they're doing, they're getting scored really well. All of a sudden, they're unaware that they have done anything differently. They're in a chorus, they're feeling good, they know the moves, they start getting scored poorly. And they feel like this is really weird. I mean, maybe this game doesn't work, maybe the technology doesn't work, you know, maybe I suck now. I mean, there's all these things that are going on in their heads. And that was our fault, because they felt completely disembodied from the experience. We realized that all we had to do was put this little teeny live silhouette in the corner of the screen so they didn't feel disembodied, so that they could see themselves there. And then they would realize, oh, while I was dancing, I moved a little too close to the camera, and now, you know, my hands are not being detected anymore, my feet are not being detected anymore. And so those types of experiences of really recognizing what is it that we can do to support the user in feeling amazing and also having the experience that we intended. So really, really important to think about what those barriers are. The other thing I wanted to share with you guys is, as we are making products in this health and well-being space, it's even more important to understand the specific needs of our users. meet them where they are, understand where they are. There may be much more sensitivity to different demographics that we may be working with today than we were when we were building a game for this really universal community. And think about how you may be affecting their state, their emotional state, in a positive or in a negative way. I also wanted to mention about testing hardware, because I worked with lots of games and products with different types of hardware. Really, really important to test with different bodies. You know, we are all different sizes. We are all different shapes. And when you are in those early stages of R&D, where you're making really important decisions about form factor, you might be deciding, are you going to make one version or multiple versions? You are also thinking about who you are delivering this experience to and how diverse is that population. So when we were making the smart glasses at Interaxon, I had this new experience that I had never had before, because here we were making smart glasses, and I began to learn about, you know, people's nose bridges and the shapes of their noses and the distance between, you know, where their ears are and where their eyes are. And it was super interesting and fun. And we brought all these different people in to try out the prototypes. And this is an area that I had never worked on before, but it was really interesting to think about, how are we, when we are delivering new kinds of hardware, which so many of you probably are working with today, are we thinking about all of the possible sizes and shapes of people that would experience them? The other thing I've been thinking about is how hardware and new technologies are interacting with people's personal data and their biometrics. So we need to gain trust with these players if we are going to deliver these new experiences. And one of the ways in which I think we can do that is in a testing environment. We can begin to learn, where are they uncomfortable or unfamiliar? How are they suspicious? How might we actually ease those fears so that we may bring a product to them because we want to serve them? To recap, create a context that matters. So ground the user in a world they understand. Develop interaction mechanics, layered interaction mechanics. Ensure that the core experience feels really, really good, really satisfying, and then build on top of that, keeping in mind the depth of emotional transformation that you intend for your user. Invest in feedback systems. Don't underestimate the necessity of really effective communication through exceptional user interface design. It takes a lot of time, and it's really important. Nail ease of use and delight on day one. Fine-tune that first-time experience to be really intuitive, really accessible, and emotionally uplifting. Test, test, test. Be a humble designer. Observe and listen to your users, and strive to meet them where they are. I believe that it is possible to create new immersive experiences that enable positive emotion and reduce negative emotional impact. I believe it's possible to change the way people feel for the better. Games for health, the transformative tech field, neuro-wellness products, none of those were a thing 10, 15 years ago when we were making our music video games. And you know, many people out there, they may just say, hey, those are just silly video games. Yet, we enabled joy and connection and self-confidence in millions of people. And a ton of people who never considered themselves video gamers, they played our games. I think it's because we were dedicated to the practices that I talked about today. The experiences that we made were accessible, they were intuitive, they were really fun, and they tapped directly into a greater sense of well-being. I believe that your products and experiences and games can surprise a culture. You can enable joy. You can create connection and even make us healthier in this time of great need and great suffering. Whether your product is silly or serious, whether you think it's really important or just a brief escape, don't lose sight of the power and responsibility that you have when you develop a very addictive, engaging human interaction mechanic. What is it in service of? What is it in service of? I believe all of you creators out here, you can transform the way people feel. You can help people feel better within themselves and feel connected to one another. Thank you, guys. So before we get into Q&A, stand up, shake your hands out, stretch a little bit, say hello to your neighbor. Let's have a dance party. Anyway, relax, sit down, have a drink, and then we can do whatever. We can talk about questions that you guys have based on the talk. If you have design challenges from your products, more than happy to kind of jam on those with all of you. And I'm going to have some water.
Do you want to like continue with the Q&A yourself, or do you need?
No, you can. I mean, I'll just yeah. You can give the mic to people. Yeah. Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Good to see you.
You're getting better all the time at speaking.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very nicely concise and inspiring.
Oh, thank you. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yay.
So, how busy are you with all that stuff currently? When do you think you might work on another project?
Oh yeah, totally. I'm available. We should chat.
Okay.
Yeah. I got plenty of time. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Take care. Thank you. All right. So questions. Do you want to? Yeah.
Hi. Look out. Hi.
Hi.
How are you? First of all, thanks so much for the presentation. That was really excellent.
Thank you.
I'm curious, when you're designing for something like the Muse that people don't necessarily have direct control over something like their brain patterns, right? Compared to when they're strumming the guitar or exactly how they're moving their body, it's really easy to give them immediate feedback on that. Mm-hmm. How do you do that for something like the Muse that is much more subconscious, hard to control directly?
Well, so what the team worked on, as opposed, it almost feels real time, because what's happening is that you're hearing this soundscape. For instance, you're hearing sort of this soft pattern of rain. And then all of a sudden, when it detects that your mind is wandering, the storm comes up. So the audio changes. And that is a cue. It's a cue for you. And then as you relax, the audio gradually comes back. And now you know that you're there. Now, you might know that you're there anyway, right? But this is a way in which it can help you. Because one of the things about meditating, which is so challenging, right, is like, you don't know where you are. And one of the things I would say is that, with Muse, we were using a concentration meditation practice, and that's what it was built based on. There's lots of different types of meditation practices, and so, the tech behind that would have to change, although you could still use a feedback mechanism that was similar, as long as the tech behind it supported the type of meditation. And actually, by the way, is he still here? Oh, if you,
So you spoke a little bit about incentivizing like user interaction with tracking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if your sense is that tracking alone is enough to kind of help people create healthy habits, or if there are like other motivations that are necessary.
So give me an example of what the product or the experience is.
Let's say, okay, so something I'm working on right now is a digital universal tenant application, right? So it's like a form that people have to fill out, and it's detailed.
Okay.
They have to spend about 30 minutes filling out a form, which is boring.
Uh-huh.
But once they do it, they can use it to apply to 20 different properties and landlords.
Okay.
So, but there's like an economic thing where people don't actually do the behavior that's most logical because there's an emotional component.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think whenever, I would put it this way, whenever it's possible within the experience, or maybe at certain points within the journey of an experience, you can give feedback. And feedback is a huge realm of creativity that can come in all kinds of forms. You're going to have a better chance of success. Is it necessary? Well, you would discover that based on testing, right? So that's, if you have an experience that takes 30 minutes and you're noticing that people are stopping after they filled out 2 lines, well, then it looks like you need something. Right? If the demographic that is so motivated because they need what they're going to get from the end of it, you may discover that you don't need it. And that's the piece that I think is really important. That's why user testing is so critical. We all have different experiences that we are creating for different needs, and you may discover, God, we're really seeing a fall off here. Okay, how can we give people feedback? What can we do to motivate people? And there's all different ways. It could be during the experience. It could be after the experience, not just after the experience. I mean, you might be sending them all different types of motivations. Yeah.
Got it. So it's not just tracking, but it's giving feedback on progress at those key
It can be very useful. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
So you showed how you can make an experience more immersive and like this. And I wonder what determines the time span of people to use this product or experience. Like, for example, how long they would interact with this game, how much it would be in time, and how can you make them come back if they stopped, for example, how you can bring them back.
So to me, that's 2 different questions. I mean, one is how long is an experience? Well, all of us in the room that are making products would create products that are of all different lengths. So, I shared with you when we were making music and dance games, most of our levels were 3 to 5 minutes because they were based on a song. How long did people play? Sometimes one song, and they might play for 2 hours. So, that's very variable, right? So I think what's important when you're thinking about how long is the experience that you want to make, if you're developing it, is first you got to start with what is the experience, who is my user, what am I intending that person to feel and have that experience. So that's one part. The second part is, how do you get people to come back? Also, so much variety there, right? I think, one of the things I talked about is how critically important the first time experience is, because many people, many products lose people after they just try it once. And it's hard to get somebody back if they've had a crappy first time experience. It just is, especially in this world today where there's so many opportunities to try something else. So super important to spend your time to ensure that they have had such a good time in whatever it is that you're delivering, right? That they'll come back a second time. That's still not enough. If your product that you want to deliver has to do with making change over time, which I'm going to make an assumption that a lot of us that are working in the world of health and well-being are looking at how do we transform people over time. You know, it doesn't happen like that. So how you integrate these various layers over time is a way in which to motivate people to keep coming again. And then there's all different kinds of innovations around reminders or, you know, different ways in which you might motivate somebody to come back. And personally, I have been playing around with reminders lately, and I find them really annoying, you know, and it would be a great way for all of us to innovate on how are we going to remind people to come back and do the things that we want you to do in this day and age where we're being notified by way too many things. And so, you know, the other day maybe you got someone here knows, I was looking for if there's any way to have a reminder that is outside of the technical, you know, restrictions that you have as a banner. And I saw this app that looked like you could have this gorgeous image be your reminder. So I went and got the app, and that's not the experience that I had. So I don't know, has anybody like have seen a reminder that does not look like a standard reminder? Someone should figure that out. I mean, seriously, like, you know, I got this gratitude app, and the images are beautiful, but you still have to go to it. So if I want to be, just for a moment, like blown away by the beauty of something and, you know, have gratitude for the earth, I don't want to have to swipe. I just want it to be the thing that pops up and has me just like pause for a minute. So anyway, create it. Okay, next question.
What about
Humor?
human?
Yes, human reminders are great, which would be amazing if we all committed, right, and could remember to when we interacted with each other, you know, to whatever it is that you might want to be reminded. Each time I saw you, I would say, you know, I have gratitude for our friendship.
So this is a very first-hand user experience question. I was using Duolingo, and I also use other meditation apps which tracks progress. So one thing really got me was when I had 200 days of practice, and when I crossed the international date line, I lost it. And so I got so upset, I don't actually go back anymore. And I was thinking, no, my purpose for using this app is totally not about the number, but I was just so upset I couldn't go back.
Yeah, so I mean,
how do you design?
So that's a perfect example, right, of something that, you know, they didn't think about. You know, they didn't want to do that to you. The designers are probably, maybe they don't know. Maybe you could email them and let them know, because they don't want that to happen to you, right? And you can't anticipate everything when you're making a product. As a matter of fact, when you think that you know everything, like, is actually when you make a poor product. Like, you have to bring people in, and then in this day and age, very different than when we were making our console video games, we were building a game, and then we were putting it out there. And we couldn't be updating it all the time like you can with apps. But with apps, you know, you can update it all the time. So put it out there and get feedback from people. And, you know, somebody like you, a lot of apps will have, you know, a little section where you can send feedback to the designers. And I think it's really important if you have a bad experience like that, especially because you liked the app up until then. You know, so yeah, we can't think of everything. Yes.
Can you please expand on this very sensitive balance about creating addiction and creating something for becoming more mindful?
Yeah.
You are the game designer, and at the same time, you are meditator and designer for the meditation apps. How do you justify for yourself that you are creating addictive experiences but you want people to be more mindful.
Yeah, so I actually thought a lot about that when I was creating this. And here's what I think. I think that our society today, in so many different ways, and not just through technology, just the way that we are as human beings, we are consistently in pattern. We're in pattern. That's what happens, right? If you meditate or if you have a yoga practice, I have, in the last 4 to 5 months, have taken on many, many different practices to work on myself. And what I have learned is that actually by repeating them, certain ones of them are more addicting, you could say, or maybe I notice that I feel better by them. So the timing of when I do them is something that I'm now more aware of. But they're making me feel better, right? So when I think about the music games that we made, yeah, they were really addictive. And we weren't killing anybody. We were actually, in some ways, teaching people so much about their bodies, about music, about each other. So we were creating something in service of what I would say is something good. Now, at the time, no one else on the team thought it was a wellness product. I mean, this is me looking at what we did for many years and saying, hey, could we create something again that was that fun, you know? So what I would say, and really what I thought about is, we're all responsible for the behaviors that we are asking people to do. And if we can figure out ways in a positive way to help people pattern in a positive way, we might actually improve our culture. Because look at the opposite. I mean, look at what's happening in our society today. The behaviors that are, let's just say, less appealing to those of us that care about the direction of our society are the ones that are being repeated over and over again. So what is the experience that you are creating that will actually shift that for somebody? So that's the way I think about it.
I think your experience with kinetic and actual physical things and your invitation people to move actually together in teams, that's very different from most of the video games when people are just sitting and mostly alone. So that's actually a great way to transform video gaming into team building, let's say. What do you think about virtual reality when people are alone in here?
So, I mean, I think there's so much potential in VR, in AR, because one, we can transport ourselves to places that we won't go ourselves. We can create social experiences in VR and with XR and with, you know, we absolutely can. So we're not removing the possibility of social interaction. And with responsible design, we could be creating ways in which we may connect, especially because the society has moved so digital. So, you know, if people are open to this experience of, you know, what if we, what if we go into a museum together and we can interact with cool places that you and I could never go together? Like, that could be really fun, you know? So I think there's a lot of possibility. I don't think that technology itself is the problem. We have to be responsible to how we use it. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just intrigued by your latest project in dealing with issues of cognitive deficits, and I was wondering if you could talk perhaps a little bit about designing for. I mean, it seems that one of the issues with the cognitive deficit is the awareness of the cognitive deficit that you're trying to address. I mean, and I'm just thinking because dealing with mental health issues, and for example, with people who are not able to recognize what it is that they need to work on. So I was wondering if you had any experiences that were a little bit different about sort of, again, creating a context, providing feedback when maybe the problem isn't recognized.
So I love that challenge. So what I would say at Neuroscape, we're not dealing with that challenge, which I think is that's really interesting. What I've learned by working in an academic environment is, we're working on a game experience, and there are some hypotheses around, what if we create something that evaluates and trains rhythm? The scientists will say, okay, let's create this experience, and then let's try it with these different populations. So with clinical studies, I mean, you are bringing in the population. So there's no, at that point in time, there's no worry, right, about the player needing to be aware or not of their own condition. And actually, it actually doesn't even matter in the games that I've worked on so far. The games are just games. As a matter of fact, they work, what I would say, under the hood, right? They look and feel just like any video game. But under the hood, they're challenging you. So if you and I are playing this game, we're having actually different experiences on a day-to-day basis based on how well you're doing, how well I'm doing, in all different ways. And then that's just pushing at us and pushing at us and pushing at us. And it's actually working inside our brain to change us. So it's a really interesting challenge to think about. I'd love to consider that. If we were making a video game that was, say, maybe more in the wellness world outside of the clinical space, and we, wanted to address some really significant issues, how would we do that, and what are the ways? I think, just off the cuff, but I think there's all kinds of ways, is that you make an engaging experience. You learn about the conditions, you learn about the sensitivities and whatnot, but you make an engaging experience, and then you test and see what happens. I think that's where we start.
I think 2 more questions. Do you have one?
And there's someone in the back.
So I'm curious, you mentioned when it came to Muse that you didn't want people going for kind of a meditation high score. I'm curious what you found are perhaps the dangers or pitfalls of feedback, and when something like gamification cannot, necessarily be positive.
Yeah, this is my opinion. My sense is if we dig into meditation, right, and where people start, and then everybody goes on their own journey, and it actually isn't about doing it right. It is about doing it. So our job was to help people to learn how to meditate with Muse, which was important because it's different than meditating without Muse. And then to keep them engaged. And then to help them learn about the experience that they just had. So I think about, if you're in a meditation class with a teacher, often at the end of a session, maybe they lead you in a 10-minute or half hour, then they may be talking to you and help you reflect upon that experience that you just had. I think that's what I would want my application to help me do, to reflect upon the experience that I just had, which is subjective, but because it's an app, you gotta give them something, right? And so what are those things? That was what we played with. That's what we tried all different things to be able to kind of create a balance of information that we were providing for them so that there wasn't too much of that striving, which often will take them in a direction that may not be healthy for them. But we're all different. Some people love the birds. For those of you that have used Muse, some people love the birds, and there was a want to have as many birds as possible. Some people found the birds to be really antithetical to a meditation experience, and so then we really decided we would highlight recoveries, that moment in which you have wandered off and you come back. So I think there's a lot of different ways to play with it. We talk to a lot of our users just to kind of try to find the balance of, you don't want to make people feel bad, we want to help people on their journey. And sometimes they're still going to feel bad when they're meditating. All right, there was a question back there.
So just to highlight the issue of first-time use, I bought 2 Muses about a year ago for Christmas, and mine synced so easily with my phone. I'm a regular user. My husband's did not sync easily with his phone. His sits in a drawer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that first experience is actually really real. And my question's actually directly about the Muse, and I've just been so curious. Does that minute calibration actually affect how it's scoring you and relaxed, neutral, active states during your meditation period?
So that has probably changed since I was there, so I'm not sure if I could tell you now. Okay. I mean, what I can say is we were iterating on that entire experience over time, right? So often when you're sitting there and you're calibrating, it is giving the system data that will be used later. Does that today still provide, does the system work that way today? I can't say.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Do you have a Muse 1 or a Muse 2?
I think I have a 1. The 2
Okay.
that does heart rate and all that,
Yeah.
not that one. The
Yeah.
1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. All right, thanks.
Yeah.
It's still a mystery. All right,
Yeah.
thank
I
you.
mean, it did contribute, is what I would say. It
Okay.
did contribute.
Anybody else here a regular Muse
Yeah.
user?
Actually, where's Shoshan? Maybe.
User? Well, I use a Muse, and I was a aspirational meditator, I would say. And Muse, like, you don't need a Muse to meditate, absolutely. But that feedback and having the whole ritual of putting on the headband and sitting down with it and getting a sense of feedback really did, for me, cement a meditation practice. So it does
Awesome.
work.
Yeah.
In that regard.
Well, that's great to hear. You know, my feeling is that there's so many ways in which we can learn how to meditate, and Muse is one. And when it works, it's beautiful, especially for people who really need the feedback. It's also, I think, like a training wheels for some people, where you get there, you begin to recognize the experience, and then you may not need it anymore. So there's a bunch of different ways in which I think it'll be fun to try out all the new experiences that they've created.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, thank you all. I'm happy to chat with you one-on-one.